I might have got you.
That gun police and everything. Stole my wallet.
Please rise for the invocation by Reverend Will Posey, First Methodist Church.
I invite you to hold our meeting agenda in your hand as we hand this meeting over to God in prayer. God of all people, we gather tonight with humble gratitude for the weighty responsibility of governing this city and caring for her people. For us to be a city where life is well crafted for all people, we turn to you to craft our time, intentions, and work together. We recognize that every bond will be undone if we are not first bound by a selfless and unswerving commitment to justice and peace. We pray you let our dreams for growth and prosperity that we hope lie before us be shaped by hearts that are inclined by toward the poor and the needy already among us. For we do not just need body cameras, but eyes to see every body is of sacred worth, and ears to hear the story every soul has to tell. Let this council be a forum that gives voice to the voiceless and celebrates the rich diversity of our city. Let us honor and encourage all those whose work is dedicated to our community's welfare. With your streams of righteousness, we pray you wash away all unholy temptations and nurture in us the dreams that you have sown deep in our souls. We pray you guide our work tonight so that all people who call Hickory home may be blessed. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we want to especially recognize tonight one of our interns, and I've been told, I'm not going to mention who told me this, but I've been told she's one of the best interns we've ever had. And all of them have been great, right? Hannah Bumgarner, daughter of David and Tammy Bumgarner, will graduate from St. Stephen's High School in June. She's standing up there in the back. She will be attending Virginia Tech University this fall. Hannah,
is she a plant?
Hannah has been working in the Office of Communications, helping Mandy and Dana with press releases, taking photos, and much more. Hannah grew up in our recreation programs and participated in St. Stephen's High School, volleyball, basketball, and track all 4 years, and also lettered in cross country and indoor track her senior year, making for 5 sports in 1 year. She is running the Charity Chase Half Marathon June 7th. Go Hokies! I love it when a plan comes together. We have a Business Well Crafted Award to be presented by the Business Development Team. Dave Gissy.
Mayor Wright, members of council, Mr. Berry, Mr. Crone, it's my honor this evening to make a presentation of the Business Well Crafted Award. On a quick side note, this one's a special one. I know Ernie, and this will be probably the last thing that I do as part of the committee. I will be rotating off, and I do want to thank you all for the privilege of having served. It's been very rewarding these past 5 years. For those that don't know, a little history of what the Business Well Crafted Award is the Business Development Committee was founded in order to support and promote our existing as well as new businesses. And as an extension of that, we developed the Business Well Crafted Award to recognize those businesses in our community that have been in here, our area, for 75 years or more. Speaking of interns, it was an intern 2 or 3 years ago who spent the better part of the summer, I believe, compiling this list, and the only one that did not make the list, which was an extraordinary job that he did, and he went through all sorts of data to find these, was for some reason CBSA Architects, our recipient tonight. I guess we can only guess that it's because Ernie is such a timid and bashful person. Nobody knew anything about him. But anyway, we're playing catch up, and again, we encourage anyone in the community that might know of someone or a business that is fast approaching 75 years or past that to let us know so that we can recognize them in the same fashion. Right now, we'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about CBSA Architects, and at this time, if I could have Ernie join me, as well as Mr. Bill and Mr. Walker. And we are very privileged to have the daughter of the founder, Mr. Clemmer, Mickey Shuford, and if you would be kind enough to join us as well, please. Now, I'm liable to say some things wrong, but I'm pretty confident Ernie will correct me. The business was founded in 1934 by Mr. Clemmer, and he is a Lenore-Rhine graduate. They began doing the architecture design for many of the area's most well-known buildings. It was located basically in the same place that it has always been, started in a house, and then they designed their own offices, and then moved from the home, tore it down, and moved into the new structure. They're known for architecture that they've done at Lenore-Rhine University, Catawba Valley Community College, the First Plaza building on Tate Boulevard, the Wachovia building, Corning's main office, and many other buildings throughout our community. We have them to thank for the beautiful designs of the architecture, the buildings that we have in and around our community. Recently, one of the things that they did, which was, I think, an effort of love, was the designing of the wheelchair accessible treehouse at the Zara Baker All Children's Playground. I think that was an act of love on your part in doing that, and they said it created a bit of a challenge to make a tree house that is wheelchair accessible. Currently, they're working on one of our magnificent renovations of mills at Moretz Mill, and I think we can all say that that is a wonderful job that's taking place over there. The firm now is comprised of Ernie Sills, Mr. Marty Bill, and Steve Walker. A brief history of it was that it did close down back during World War II. When it reopened, Mr. Clemmer added Mr. Bush. And then Ernie came along in 1968, and Fred Abernathy after that. So it was Clemmer, Bush, Sills, and Abernathy, later shortened to CBSA. More recently, was the addition of Marty Bill and Steve Walker, and that is the current architects of the firm. In addition to what they do as a business, Ernie's very active in Rotary, currently president of the Lake Hickory Rotary Club. And how I got to know Ernie, I would like to tell you that you spoke of the interns that the city is very proud to host. CBSA do the very same thing and have for a number of years, and my son was fortunate to work one summer in high school at Ernie. And he carried two things away from that experience. The first was he didn't want to be an architect. He said he didn't have the creativity to be able to do it, but he wanted to build the things that an architect designed. And today he does that. He is a graduate of NC State. Yes. In engineering. The second thing was he came to me and he said, "Dad," he said, I realize I don't want to be an architect. I don't have that creative mind. But he said, I am just so hopeful that someday I'll be able to work in an environment like CBSA was. He constantly praised you all for the camaraderie, the support that you had for one another there, and for a 16-year-old to recognize that this really was an outstanding environment to work in was pretty impressive. And to this day, he still says that very same thing. So for being able to provide those internships, which is guidance and inspiration to that age group that we want to keep in this area, I want to thank CBSA for that as well. At this time, I would like to go ahead and make the presentation of the award. You can join me over here, Ernie. Bill, please join us all. It wouldn't have been here without your father. The award says Business Well-Crafted Award, CBSA Architects, presented by the Hickory Business Development Committee, banking businesses for more than 75 years of doing business in the community. We thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm glad Dave didn't tell everything he knows. It was a great pleasure having his son. We have an intern right now who's an Appalachian student, Go Apps, but can't beat state. And we've always found that having young people around makes you think sometimes. You know, you get old and stodgy like Jill, and then, you know, I had to do it. But we really do appreciate this, and you know, it takes teamwork. It's not one guy doing it. It's a team, and we have Wanda Yancey here, who's our office manager, who really runs everything. I mean, you know, she lets us pretend like we do, but we know who runs it. So thank y'all very much. And I have my grandchildren, two of my grandchildren, and my wife.
We all know none of this would be possible without Cindy.
Oh, yeah, that's very true.
You owe everything to that woman.
Now comes the
Thank y'all. I'm going to sit down while it's...
I think Mr. Clemmer designed the Baptist parsonage that I lived in for a long time.
I think he did.
Yeah, over on 2nd Avenue.
Mickey and I were talking about, she's got the scrapbook of all this work. Wow.
And of course, if you get the book, is it From Tavern to Town, the book that has all the architecture in it? I mean, you just go through that book. It's just CBS. Well, it used to be not be. Seals wasn't in there for a long time, but he's been in there a long time. Make no mistake about that. Okay, with that, we have 5 people listed in the agenda and 1 person who is signed up to speak. Under persons requesting to be heard. As you know, any Hickory citizen has the right to ask to speak before council. We use a guideline of 3 minutes, and but we don't like for people to leave here with something important that needed to be said that they feel they didn't get a chance to say. Well, it's a little awkward here, but could you move them over here so some of the people can see, at least one side can see one and the other side can see the other, while we also are looking at them. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to start this off in the order that appears. Delores Hammer will speak first, and then I don't think anybody's concerned about what order we go in.
Okay.
Ms. Hammer?
Okay, great. Thank you for allowing us to speak to you this evening. I'm Delores Hammer. I'm a dentist on 4th Street Southwest. I'm opposed to building a new public housing project on 4th Street Southwest for the following reasons. Number one, 4th Street is a major thoroughfare into the heart of Hickory, and it is a business corridor. Over the last several decades, business owners have made a substantial investment on the 4th Street by building commercial buildings, starting new businesses there, or by converting residential houses into places of business. It is a very costly process to change a building's use from residential to commercial, but this has been done time and again with millions invested. Now there is a proposal to build a 3-story residential apartment building on top of a building at the very beginning of 4th Street Southwest. This structure will tower over one of the main entrances into Hickory, and there are no other 3-story buildings along this road. No new homes have been built on 4th Street in over 75 years, and the construction of this project is not in keeping with the commercial nature of this street. Number two, there are 311 public housing units in Hickory, and every single one of them are in southeast or southwest Hickory. If you'll look here on this map, it will show you that every one of them are in southeast or southwest Hickory. In fact, the vast majority of them are in southwest Hickory within 1 mile radius of the proposed site on 4th Street. The present proposal is to move almost 1/5 of these units to 4th Street. If it is the intent of HUD to scatter public housing, then let's scatter it. Why should it be concentrated in one quadrant of the city? Why not give low-income residents an opportunity to live in northwest or northeast Hickory? Why not find more sites with fewer units per site? If land cost is a problem, then I would suggest the city subsidize the cost of the land and help Hickory Housing purchase land in other quadrants of the city. I'm convinced that the money can be found to help with such a purchase. We need to diversify our neighborhoods in all of Hickory, not just southeast and southwest Hickory. Southwest Hickory does have diverse neighborhoods. We have businesses, we have residences, we have public housing. Where is the diversity in northwest and northeast Hickory? You're council members. You can make this happen. You can create diverse neighborhoods in other parts of the city that we already have. Number three, Hickory is moving forward from the loss of industry, manufacturing, and a severe recession. We must endeavor to make positive decisions for all. Did anyone consider the impact that this would have on a successful business corridor? Did anyone consider the effect this would have on property values and, in turn, city revenue basis?
3 minutes.
1 sentence. We want this project directed to another location. We will assist in locating other suitable sites. We ask you to talk to the people at Housing Authority. Use your influence so that no public housing project is undertaken on 4th Street Southwest. Thank you.
Next, Crystal Rogers.
Hello, council members, Mr. Berry, Mr. Crone. I'm Crystal Rogers, and my business is Elite Properties on 4th Street. I sell commercial and residential property, but I also have a side passion of restoring historic homes. And as you know, many of the beautiful homes in Hickory are located along 4th Street and in the historic Green Park subdivision. I've renovated 2 commercial properties on the street and several in the Green Park area. And because I live in Acreage and Mountain View, that's my neighborhood. And I've seen it transform from a primarily residential area to a quaint, charming, low traffic business corridor that we are all really proud of. In the real estate industry, there's 3 things to think about when you develop a property or buy a property: location, location, and location. So I think the first thing we need to think about is, does this property fit aesthetically into the 4th Street quaint small business corridor? In my opinion, a high-rise, high-density residential apartment complex of any kind doesn't fit in this area. A practical concern is this project is 2 and 3 bedroom units, mostly children, well, a lot of children, families. And the current project, while the buildings are beautiful, they're 20 feet off of a busy thoroughfare in the main road into Hickory. And you have a lot of balconies. And I have 3 kids, and I haven't parked in my garage for a year. So when you're in a high-rise apartment with 3 and 4 kids, your balcony gets your bikes, your tricycles, your stuff. And that's going to be the first thing that you see when you come into Hickory. The second location aspect to consider is traffic and safety. 4th Street is already backed up at 5 o'clock, and many of the residences that live there said they can't even back up at 5 o'clock. Adding 300 people, approximately 120 cars, is going to speed up having to widen the 4th Street. We know it's probably coming, and we're sad about that because we have already 20 feet front yards with big oak trees, and we know it's coming, but we hate to speed it up. The second thing is safety. When you have estimated 180 children on a 3-acre parcel beside a main thoroughfare, how do you keep children out of the street? It's a major safety concern. You have a 5-year-old on a 3-story building with marbles, 20 feet from the main corridor coming into Hickory. You have 12 and 13-year-olds walking to Walmart across Highway US 70. And it is, my opinion, it is not a safe place for families to live. The third thing you've got to think about in real estate is how does this affect your end user? Your end user is going to be families. Is it marketable? The hardest sell I can ever think of is a condo overlooking a thoroughfare. People want to look over a green space, or they want to look over a residential area. In my opinion, I support public housing, I support growth, and I support the things they're trying to do. It just needs to be a few streets back in a safe residential area. Thank you.
Mr. Paul Gadd.
Council, Mr. Berry, Mr. Crone, thank you. I'm Paul Gadd, and I'm a member of this 4th Street crowd. I'm addressing you as a property manager, as a tenant, and also as a property owner of property along 4th Street Southwest. 4th Street is one of the main business corridors entering our city. It is mainly improved with offices and retail space. Property fronting along 4th Street is not the proper location for high-density apartments. We object to the proposal of these apartments to be built by the Hickory Housing Authority only in location. We just don't want them fronting on 4th Street. I have spoken to approximately 30 property owners myself and numerous tenants who are on 4th Street, and all of them are opposed only to location. We are not against fair housing nor public housing. 2 tenants and 1 today told me if this were to be a reality that he would probably continue his existing lease, but he would not renew at the time it expires. And that to me is scary. He said he can only visualize coming into his office early in the morning, looking at these high-rise buildings, looking at balconies where maybe some lady comes out in her house coat to water her flowers, or spring leaves hanging down off of the balcony, or towels over the balcony, and these properties are only 20 feet back. He just says it just has the wrong visual effect. Currently, 4th Street is gradually being revitalized, and these purchases are large investments, and the source is coming from the private sector, not from grant money. The change that is currently in place is pleasing to the neighborhood. With these proposed apartments, we consider it to be a detriment to 4th Street. Property along this street will experience a slowdown in growth and could begin to experience economic obsolescence due to high vacancy, no demand, and depressed properties that is currently viable with a promising outlook. The proposed 60 apartment occupancies will be in the range of 300 people. This is approximately 100 people to the acre for 3.23 acres. This is a high density reflecting a negative impact. The buildings are 3 stories. There is not a 3-story building in this sector. If you think of the police department, it's only 2-story. MDI is only 2-story. Most of the properties along this street are 1 to 1.5 story. Even Capital Bank buildings, 2 stories. Also, the setback is only 20 feet, and when you're looking at 3-story buildings, it is a visual distraction. As such, it has a different characteristics than the neighborhood along 4th Street.
3 minutes.
These apartments are intrusive to high density, they're overbearing, they're not in character, and they're out of balance and not homogeneous with the neighborhood. They told us we could find other sites. I have identified 5 sites that are available. All of them are larger. They're ranging, say, 8 acres for $40,000 up to 15 acres, bordering Highway 321 behind Walmart for less than $170,000. We ask that the council speak to the Hickory Housing Authority with our concerns, and that they do not sign the contract that they said is not signed, and they look elsewhere for property and do so until they find it. Thank you.
Ms. Murray Yount.
That's not Mary Young.
Yeah, actually, I'm Christine Wynn. I'm also a resident with a business on 4th Street. I'm a residential appraiser and have been for 20 years in this area, and actually apprenticed under Bruce. I'd like to thank everybody for letting me speak. The proposed apartment housing project on 4th Street is likely to prove to be detrimental to the existing businesses and future growth of this area. The Hickory area economy continues to struggle with major companies downsizing or relocating offices to other cities. Hickory must rely on small businesses and the growth of such businesses to diversify and create employment demand in the area. The sustained growth on 4th Street over the past several years is an example of small business growth in our area. Entrepreneurs in the area have rehabilitated a declining area in both appearance and patron population. This main artery into the square, or Hickory hub, services plus or minus 10,000 vehicles a day. The proposed housing project is likely to have a negative impact on growth, if not reverse it. I understand the need for low-income housing and the need for the housing to be centrally located near amenities for potential tenants. However, the negative impact of this type of housing complex cannot be ignored. I am not suggesting that all subsidized housing tenants are criminals. However, the crime rates in these areas are statistically higher. Additionally, the appearance of these properties typically declines over time and can have a negative aesthetic impact on the area as a whole. The Southwest Hickory area already has a high concentration of Section 8 housing. Several tenants on 4th Street have already suffered break-ins and minor vandalism. Additional concentration of units in the area is likely to increase these occurrences. A complex such as the one proposed will keep small businesses from considering leasing or buying in the area and halt or reverse growth. Locating the complex in another location or several other locations will minimize the impact of the housing complex on surrounding properties. It will provide low-income housing to potential tenants in other areas of the city and other employment centers where it's not currently available. Hickory needs growth, but in my opinion, you cannot afford to approve projects that will detrimentally affect what little sustained growth we have had over the past several years. In order for Hickory to grow, we must base our decisions and approve projects on the overall impact to the community. We need your support to help protect our businesses. We appreciate your consideration and respectfully request that alternative sites for this project be considered. Thank you very much for your time.
Ms. Kim Clarke.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kim Clarke, and I'm the attorney for Hammer Properties on 4th Street. There are 3 specific things you can do to help us. First, you can use your influence on the officers and directors of the Housing Authority to encourage them to find another site for this project. You have a lot of influence with them, not just because the mayor has appointed the commissioners, but also because this council has the right to abolish the Housing Authority and thereby have its duties assumed by the city. Your right to adopt such a resolution, whether you do so or not, gives you a tremendous amount of influence over the Housing Authority. We ask you to use this influence to persuade the Housing Authority to locate its new housing project in a place other than 4th Street. Second, Mr. Mayor, you can appoint additional commissioners to the Housing Authority. You can appoint as many as 4 additional commissioners to bring the total to 11, and I urge you to do just that. You need look no further than this room to find 4 interested people who can think independently and put fresh eyes on this project. I urge you to take advantage of this opportunity to appoint 4 more commissioners to the Housing Authority. And the final thing that you can do to help the concerned citizens of 4th Street, and the most important one, is to adopt a resolution making the budgeting and accounting of the Housing Authority an integral part of the City of Hickory's budget. The general statutes empower you to do this. If you adopt such a resolution, then the Housing Authority will no longer be a public authority, but rather will be deemed to be a department of the city. Their budget would have to be prepared, submitted, and approved just like any other department's budget. Why is this important? Because the Housing Authority has created a nonprofit corporation called Yount Capital Ventures with the same board members, officers, and directors. Why is there a need for 2 entities? Who knows, but it is obvious that they are dealing with themselves, and that raises a question of a conflict of interest. Yount is charged with raising $7 million for this project, and if successful, the rents will be guaranteed by the federal government for 40 years. If other criteria are met, the project could qualify for 9% in tax credits, which would be almost $700,000. 40 years of guaranteed rents, a $7 million project, $700,000 in tax credits, all without any degree of oversight, all generated due to the mysterious relationship between the Hickory Housing Authority and Yount Capital Ventures. This project needs independent, watching eyes, your eyes and the public's eyes. For that reason, I ask you to formally adopt a resolution providing that the Housing Authority budget be part of the city's budget, thereby making the Housing Authority no longer a public authority, but rather a department of the city and subject to its supervision. If you do this, then you as city leaders and we as the public will have a greater voice in how Southwest Hickory is developed. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this subject? I will now ask Mr. Stephen Ivester, who has signed up to speak, to come forward, please.
Mayor Wright, council members, Mr. Berry, Mr. Crone. I'm here to talk about the Cloninger Mill site that you're going to consider under departmental reports. First, I'd like to congratulate whoever it was that is contributing this $900,000. I have a feeling it's an individual. And I'd like to thank Outward Bound for involving themselves. And I think there's someone either in this audience or before me on the podium that probably coordinated this thing, and I think they should be congratulated for doing it. Myself, I've always felt that that particular piece of land there on the corner of the Cloninger Mill site is a gateway to the city and a natural part of a park to be located there. There's no flat land. You know, I was part of all the focus groups that considered the design of that park. They didn't have a solution to the parking problem. They were going to park along the street on the southwest side of the site. Now, I'm not saying that 10 acres should be parking, but at least it's an area that's level enough that you could have some parking. The will of the focus groups was that 10 acres would stay part of the park. Now, the designers sort of ignored all that. And we asked them, we said, well, why didn't you consider putting that 10 acres as part of the park? Why didn't you consider developing that with the park? They said, our charter excluded that 10 acres. Now, I hope that Outward Bound will have some contributions as to how that park should be configured, in addition to providing the money and the change. But I think the whole plan needs to be revisited when you put that 10 acres back, because suddenly now you do have some level land, which there wasn't any before. And you do have some parking besides on-street parking over there on the southwest end, which there wasn't before. There's no uncertainty about this money. You know, There was a time when someone would have written a $900,000 check, but nobody asked. But this money will be there, and it can be used to develop that park. Now, it's my feeling that if we have the development that's talked about in the $25 million bond up on the other end of Hickory, and we have a park down here on this end of Hickory, a lot of people like canoes and kayaks. There's not much water frontage there, but up that creek's a good place to launch canoes and kayaks. And people could travel up and down the waterfront of Hickory, just like they do down at Whitewater. Whitewater's now renting canoes on Lake Norman, in addition to running people up and down the rapids. I think that the combination of what's being planned and the water plant property on the northwest end of the lake, with this Cloninger Mill and the money to make it happen on the southeast end of the lake, we would begin to be where Hickory is a city on a lake instead of just a city with a lake. And I think I urge you to consider this seriously, and not knowing the details, that's your discretion, but I urge you to consider this proposal seriously. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of May 5th?
I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Seaver, second by Patton. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous, and all members are present. Motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of Hickory City Council and Parks and Rec Department.
So move.
Motion by Patton.
Second.
Second by Seaver. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Motion to reaffirm and ratify on second reading. I'll make the motion we reaffirm and ratify on second reading.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Meisner first. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Anything to be removed from the consent agenda?
Move to be approved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Meisner to approve the consent agenda, second by Patton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Departmental report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll call on the city's Deputy City Attorney, Ms. Arnita Dula, to come to the podium and present an agreement between North Carolina Outward Bound School and the City of Hickory as it relates to a donation and Cloninger Mill property. Ms. Dula.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, Mr. Berry, Mr. Crone. I'd like to start by saying this is a wonderful opportunity, and Mr. Ivester basically gave part of my presentation, so I should just say ditto and sit down, but I won't. But this is a wonderful opportunity that has arisen, a donation from North Carolina Outward Bound Schools to the City of Hickory for the Cloninger Mill property, the 10.1 acres that has been marketed as for commercial sale. And this will provide a wonderful opportunity for park development in exchange for placing or entering into a declaration of covenants and restrictions on the property. Before I go further into the actual agreement itself, I'd actually like to call on a representative from North Carolina Outward Bound Schools, Mr. Dan Leroy, who is the Director of Development, and he's going to come for a moment and share some information about North Carolina Outward Bound and how this fits into their particular mission.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you, Arnita. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. Again, my name is Dan Leroy, and I am the Director of Development for North Carolina Outward Bound School. And our Executive Director, let's see, let me show you the director. Great, thank you. I'm here tonight on behalf of our Executive Director, Mr. Whitney Montgomery, who unfortunately could not be with you tonight. So you got me. But I'm happy to speak to you a little bit about North Carolina Outward Bound School, what we're about as an organization, and why we're interested in this project. Outward Bound in general is about changing lives through challenge and discovery. And Outward Bound actually is not a program or an organization. It's really an educational movement. And it was founded by a man named Kurt Hahn in Scotland in 1941. And if you look at the quote here from Kurt Hahn, Hahn said, "There's more to us, more in us than we know. If we can be made to see it, perhaps for the rest of our lives, we will be unwilling to settle for less." And this is really the core philosophy of what Outward Bound is about. It's about really discovering in each of us what we're truly capable of. And Outward Bound courses provide an environment where young people and adults can make that discovery. The North Carolina Outward Bound School was founded in 1967. Still going?
Yeah, I think you're safe.
Okay. So we are an independent 501c3 nonprofit. We're chartered by Outward Bound USA. We're one of 40 Outward Bound schools in the world. And our first base camp was established in 1967 at Table Rock. And our first administrative headquarters was in Morganton. We're now based in Asheville. Just a few images here to give you a sense of the kinds of experiences that our students have. And the outcomes from those experiences are really about self-discovery, about leadership, about teamwork. And you know, I can speak to you tonight not just as a staff person, but also as an alumni myself. I went on a course in 1990, 25 years ago. I was 15 at the time, and I can tell you that it was one of the most formative experiences that I had in my life. I wouldn't be doing what I am today or have nearly the success in my life if it weren't for that experience. And we hear that reliably and consistently from our alumni all the time. A little bit more about North Carolina Outward Bound School. Although we do work quite a bit with young adults, we also work with adults. And our work involves partnerships with schools, colleges, educational organizations. We do a lot of leadership development work with private companies. We have a veterans program as well, where we work with almost 200 veterans per year who are coming back to their communities from service, predominantly in Iraq and Afghanistan, and helping to support a successful transition back into civilian life. So these courses are built around a progression that delivers powerful life lessons by encouraging participants to safely and confidently step outside of their comfort zones and travel in spectacular wilderness areas. And so the natural world is really the site for where these journeys take place. We are based in North Carolina. We have base camps, 2 base camps here in the mountains. And we also have a base camp out on the Outer Banks. We have a base camp in Patagonia, and we have 3 base camps in the state of Florida. So our reach is broader than the state of North Carolina, even though this is where we started. I mentioned before, part of the challenge sometimes is about working with others, learning to cooperate with others, build effective teams, and that's where people can discover their ability to lead, their ability to follow. I mentioned the veterans program. This is a slide from our veterans program. The bonding that veterans talk about from their experiences that happens, spending this time in a natural place with fellow veterans, having the conversations about their experiences, has proven to be very therapeutic to those individuals, and it's been one of our most successful programs. There's an enormous sense of accomplishment that comes from completing one of these courses that sticks with our students for a lifetime. These are the 4 pillars of Outward Bound, what we teach. It is an educational program. Physical fitness, craftsmanship, self-reliance, and compassion. These came directly from Kurt Hahn, and they're infused into everything we do as a school. I want to just talk a little bit about why this partnership with the City of Hickory is important to us. I've had an opportunity to look into the Cloninger Mill project a little bit, to look at the master plan. It's been exciting to learn more about it. I think to us, this is a way for us to really demonstrate our shared commitment to outdoor recreation with this park. We have an opportunity here to bring the mission of challenge and discovery into the city of Hickory, which is something that's unique for us and for other Outward Bound schools as well. And the park itself is a great demonstration of some of the pillars of Outward Bound. Physical fitness, you've got a great, fitness trail and the mountain bike area, and all the different elements there provide great opportunities for people to recreate, but also to challenge themselves and to improve their level of physical fitness. Using the outdoors as a classroom is something that Outward Bound is central to what we do. Here's a great opportunity in the city of Hickory to create an outdoor classroom to the benefit of young people and adults for the city. Stewardship of the natural world. You can't experience an Outward Bound course in one of these incredible areas without developing a strong connection and affection for the natural world. The same is true with our city parks. By giving people an opportunity to get out and experience nature, they develop that affection for it and become good stewards of it. Whether it's through a Outward Bound experience or through a city park, we believe in enhancing the quality of life in our communities. And parks do that, and we support that. And finally, as we get ready as a school to celebrate our 50th year in our history, this is an enormous opportunity for us to really extend and expand our legacy as an institution by being associated with such a positive project in your community. So thank you all for allowing me to share this with you tonight, and we're very pleased to have the opportunity to partner with you all on this exciting project.
I'd like to speak with you for a moment about the actual agreement. In exchange for a donation of $900,000, the city is being asked to enter into a declaration of covenants and restrictions. Oops. Yes, that's correct. Thank you. The declaration would be applicable to the 10.1 acres that have currently been marketed for commercial sale and use, as well as the remainder of the larger park parcel. There are three primary restrictions that would be placed upon the property. First of all, commercial or industrial uses would be prohibited. Second, there could be no additional subdivision of the property other than what currently exists. There are some parcels located adjacent to the larger parcel that have been set aside for potential residential development, but the actual park property itself could not be subdivided any further. Finally, there could be no changes to the topography other than those necessary for erosion control, recreational purposes, establishing, maintaining, and repairing trails and attendant structures, construction, maintenance, and repair of drainage ditches, and water control structures. The rights that would be reserved to the city. The property would be reserved for improvements related to recreational and educational purposes. For example, hiking, biking, camping, picnic areas, etc. The right to dedicate the property or portions to the public use. The right to place accessory structures such as storage buildings for equipment in public restrooms and other similar structures. The right to also have limited commercial leasing ventures, for example, a mountain bike rental stand. And also, of course, parking for visitors, and the right to install, maintain, repair, replace, remove, and relocate utilities, including electric, gas, water, sewer, and telecommunications. What is the overall effect of the covenants and restrictions that would be placed on the property? The covenants and restrictions, of course, would not affect ownership. The city owns the property and would continue to do so. However, the property would be conserved as a park in perpetuity. The covenants and restrictions do run with the land. In other words, they're permanent. And they are binding on the city's successors and assigns. The rights, or the benefits that are being granted to the North Carolina Outward Bound School are assignable with proper notice from the entity to the city. And you have, of course, the full agreement before you as well as the exhibit map. So at this time, I will entertain any questions.
So if the city needed or was asked to donate some land adjacent Cloninger Mill for expansion of the right-of-way, does this agreement allow for that specifically?
A right-of-way for what purposes? For
the widening of Cloninger Mill Road.
I'm not certain about that we would permit that.
I think I'm gonna need to understand that a little clearer before I can, because I think Cloninger Mill has the potential to be widened at some point in the future. I think it's shown up on some.
And or 127.
And or 127 too. Yeah, that's true, because there's fronts on that. The clause you said about public use, there's nothing in here about right-of-ways or condemnation or anything.
No, well, easements within the park itself, access to the trails, access to the facilities.
So but on that slide, the slide you said that the rights we were reserving.
Correct.
Dedication of property for public use, would that allow us to dedicate land to NCDOT for the widening of Cloninger Mill at such time as it's funded and appropriate?
How would that be any different than any other location where DOT widens the road and they take what they need to widen the road?
Well, here's what I would suggest to you, that perhaps that traffic could be so bad out there, stopping at the stoplight, that residents are like, we need some relief here. Folks coming down Cloninger Mill Road, we own the land. We would agree to give it to DOT, and they'd agree to widen Cloninger Mill.
So you're saying they might not do it in this case?
Well, I'm just saying it's a right that we need to reserve. We need to be able to reserve the right to Cloninger Mill be widened.
Or 127.
Or 127, yeah.
Well, read in its broadest sense, number 2 of Section 2 states the right to convey public trail easements, or dedicate all or any portion of the property for public use. I mean, the language is not so restrictive as stating that the public use has to be solely dedicated to park or recreational use. I mean, if it's interpreted broadly, then it would allow that, because that would be a necessity for the traffic flow.
Yeah, it would be purely for the public to use.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And it wouldn't impact the corpus of the property. In other words,
Correct.
It wouldn't impact the nature and the character of that remaining as
Correct.
Recreational property.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the utility rights you reserve.
Similar to that.
Yeah.
Isn't it already right away there?
I don't know. I looked online. I don't think this parcel data is right, but who knows? We didn't.
Of course, the DOT has the right of eminent domain if they wanted to widen that road.
They could.
What if we wanted to widen? Just for traffic.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to.
Would that
the
fall in
difference.
the public use
I would say so.
category?
I mean, it's for the public to travel and improve or increase traffic flow.
I mean, I would assume that would be in the best interest of the city and the community and the outward bound folks to allow better access to the property.
Safer.
Right. I mean, I would say it's not violative of the restrictions. I mean, it's not necessarily a commercial use per se, or an industrial use.
Those topographical changes, we can make topographical changes for parking, right?
Yes, yes. Any other questions? Well, at this time, and I think Mr. Cron, you may need to direct whether this needs to be done in separate motions or as one motion. The recommendation is that council accepts the $900,000 donation and approve entering into the declaration of covenants and restrictions in exchange for that donation.
I think that can be one motion. To accept the donation and to approve the contract.
Yes.
Are you satisfied, Mr. Lale, with the ability to...
Yeah, but based on what Arnita said and just sort of, I think, just having a general understanding that wouldn't necessarily... There's nothing that's expressly would prohibit that on it. And
I make a motion, we accept it.
I'll second that.
Motion by Wright, second by Patton. Any further discussion?
For clarification, that's a motion to accept the donation and approve the contract?
Yes.
Yeah. Accept the donation subject to the contract.
subject to the declaration of covenants and restrictions contract. Yeah.
Any other discussion, questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous.
I have a follow-up question, and I guess it'd be for Mr. Berry. The funds are not restricted. It would be the entry would be into it would be deposited in the fund balance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Berry.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mark's going to cue the budget presentation up. So it's my pleasure to come before you all this evening and present the city manager's recommended budget for fiscal year 15-16. Of course, state law requires that the city manager recommend a budget and the city council approve an annual budget. But of course, an annual budget is really just a single-year snapshot and doesn't tell the entire story and put things in context of the past, present, and future. So I want to kind of start this evening by looking back a little bit, then discuss where we are right now, and then also look to the horizon. So if we go back and look at where we've been since 2004, just to kind of give us a 10-year window there. We've really been through a lot of difficult challenges in our local economy, and certainly that has impacted the local budget, the city budget. Some of the highlights of that are that people may not recognize is that we're actually down in full-time staff 10% over that period of time. You all are well aware of some of the things we've done with hiring freezes, with a retirement incentive that yielded quite a bit of savings to the city. Basically, we operate, your departments operate on an ongoing basis at less than full staff. We currently have 51 vacancies. We project that we'll have around 30 vacancies in the coming year. We have, in the past, in the current budget, you did approve 6 new positions. 4 of those for the new Catawba wastewater treatment plant that is up and running now. So that's funded out of the utility fund and 2 in your general fund, and those are the only positions in the last several years. Going back prior to that, some staff was added with the ladder company and the fire department, and then we added police approximately 10 years ago. So your net reduction of employees is actually greater because you've added staff in your public safety departments. We've also absorbed some state revenue losses, and I'm going to talk in more detail about another one of those, but we lost $400,000 in hold harmless funds. And you've strategically and thoughtfully over this period of time looked to move some of the fee-supported departments and functions away from reliance on tax support. So your sanitation function in this budget will be 83.5% self-supporting. You all are well aware of the changes that have taken place in the airport, and we're excited the fact that the airport is 100% funded. So in some ways, as we move forward, it feels a little bit like Dickens' tale, and we're looking at the best of times and the worst of times, because we have some really exciting things going on, but we also have some serious challenges. And this is basically the budget landscape that this year's budget recommendation is dealing with. So there are three major aspects of the fiscal year 15-16 budget that I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on, and that's revaluation, the loss of the business privilege license, and then how the implementation of the bond program is beginning to affect the budget. Revaluation, we've talked about that in these chambers recently. We've done a little bit better than the entire county in that our drop in value is 6.56%. That's $244 million loss in value. The state requires you to look at a revenue neutral rate. I think when that law was passed, the thought was that values would always increase, and so they wanted the public to know how much your rate could be reduced to be revenue neutral. In this case, and actually in the prior revaluation, it's just the opposite. We've lost value. So you calculate a revenue neutral rate that actually increases the tax rate so that you're able to collect the same amount of property tax. And we have done that, and that number is 3.95 cents, so 53.95 actually brings in the same amount of revenue as you're currently getting per the state formula. Now, revenue neutral is revenue neutral across the entire tax base. So it's impossible to look at any individual property owner or parcel and say, you know, you're revenue neutral. Some are going to have dropped more than 6.56%. Others may not have dropped as much as that, and some may have even increased. But what I'm looking at and recommending to you all is revenue neutral across the entire tax base. So let's take a little look at how that works when we get down to individual properties. So before revaluation, the average residential value in Hickory was $150,000. At the current tax rate of 50 cents, that tax bill is $750 a year, or $62.50 a month. Now, obviously, values have gone down, so if you just apply that 6.5% decrease to the average home value, your home's now worth $140,160. You calculate the revenue neutral tax rate of $53.95, and you actually have a little bit of a slight increase of $5 a year because, again, it's not perfectly averaged out. Revaluation in and of itself is not a budget buster. That can obviously be dealt with a change in the rate and bring in the same amount of revenue. However, the loss of privilege license is a budget buster. Just to remind the community, the City of Hickory and City Council can only raise revenue that is permitted by the General Assembly. You're only given certain tools by the General Assembly to raise revenues. And the business privilege license had been in place for a number of years. Was primarily in the most recent iteration that the state statutes provided several years ago, primarily was a tax that was paid by the big boxes. The big retailers in Hickory and through other communities were paying a significant amount of the $1.14 million that was raised each year. Some businesses were exempted. Some other smaller businesses paid $50, $100, $150 a year. That was some of the frustration, I think, at the state level. Was it was kind of an archaic process that had been put in place and added to over years and years and years. But instead of reforming it, they simply chose to do away with it completely. And I can't help but be a little cynical in the fact that none of that state revenue. So they didn't have to talk about teacher salaries or cutting any state programs. They could simply do away with that tax and make you all have to deal with that in your budget, and that's exactly where we are today. So effective July 1st, business privilege license is no longer available. $1.14 million loss, and that equates to a 2.7 cent increase in your property tax. I want to pause there for a second and say that I've chosen as your manager to recommend that you recover those funds through the property tax rate. We offer an extremely high quality of amenities to our residents and businesses that are very valued. And you've seen in the previous slide all of the cuts and reductions that the city's made to deal with economic changes and also state revenue cuts. And it's just simply not possible to absorb a $1.14 million reduction annually, every year, without dramatic reductions in the level of service. So let's talk a little bit about the entire budget. Each of your funds is broken down here with the comparison between the current budget, 14-15, and the recommended budget for 15 and 16, starting there at the top. Your general fund is essentially flat, almost exactly the same amount of revenue and expenditure. The utility fund is actually looking at a 10% increase, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then your other smaller, more ancillary funds have some little variations in them, primarily due to capital and some other things, but those cumulatively are less than 2%. Your internal service funds are showing quite a bit of an increase, and that's driven by your capital reserve fund. And just again, public accounting requires us to basically double count some of these things. All of these things down here are actually funded from these operating funds up here. So in some ways, it's just moving money into different accounts and different funds for the way you have to account for them. So basically, of the 6.1% increase that we're showing down here in the total budget, it's really the double counting of your utility projects, which we've got, and I'll talk about them in a little more detail. You've got $5.5 million in projects that are both funded up here, and then the money's transferred and put in your capital reserve fund, where we'll actually enter into agreements to build these projects and purchase a generator. Any questions, comments so far? Okay, so if we want to just kind of do the highlights and an overview, we've mentioned revaluation, so a penny on the tax rate has dropped from $4.60 to $4.28. We feel really good about sales tax. That's relatively strong. We continue to have a sound contingency of $650,000. I'm not recommending any new positions. I am recommending that we stay consistent with our pay-for-performance plan with 2% and 3% increases to our coworkers based on their annual evaluation. And consistent with your long-standing council policy, we are increasing the various fees throughout the city by 0.8%, which is consistent with the 2014 CPI. In the water and sewer fund, that same principle stays in effect for your water and sewer rates. I mentioned the $5.5 million in projects, and you all have actually seen 2 of those already, in that you've appropriated funds to begin design work on the downtown water and sewer line replacements. And then we've also got scheduled a generator replacement at the water plant, which will run, we're anticipating $3 million. In your solid waste fund, I mentioned the moving to being self-supporting, and of course we're implementing the single stream recycling, which I think our residents are excited about. That will enable us to significantly increase the volume and the types of materials that are recycled and not landfilled. And I'm recommending that we continue to move again in this self-supporting mode and actually increase the monthly solid waste fee that each of our residents and businesses with accounts pay from $16.50 a month to $18.50 a month. So those are kind of the highlights. Want to talk next about the third major aspect, first being revaluation, second being the loss of the privilege license, and that's the bonds. going to look at that in a couple of phases, and first talk more about the impact on your fund balance and discuss that as kind of background, and then we'll kind of come back to that in a second. So typically we don't spend too much time talking about your reserves or the fund balance that the city maintains. But given some of the things that are going on with it this year, and given the impact that your bond projects potentially will have, I think we need to drill into that a little bit more. Currently, you are above your goal of 25%. You're at $13.5 million unassigned in the general fund. Very solid, but there are pressures on that. First of all, we had a flood in 2013, and I still am amazed the incredible job that our public services and police and fire and other folks did to basically keep the city running when we lost some pretty significant infrastructure. But all the dust has basically settled there, and we have finished up the accounting with FEMA. And we had initial outlays of a couple of $1 million. We've gotten a good bit of that back, but we will end up having expended over $500,000 that will not be reimbursed by FEMA. Secondly, in last year's budget, the current year's budget, you chose to appropriate, or basically to double your paving budget to take $450,000 out of your reserves. So that is in the current budget and continues to be in the 15-16 budget. But again, it's an ongoing expenditure that you're paying for out of your reserves. Here's where we start talking about the bond projects a little bit. We've entered into a contract with Freeze and Nichols to do pre-engineering work and some cost estimates and other work to start teeing things up for your bond projects. And of course that had to come out of your fund balance because we don't have the bond funds yet. And then we had a kind of an odd situation with our auditors. You all entered into an agreement with CBSA 2 years ago to put the lights out at the soccer complex. And so we went ahead and booked the donation that CBSA will make to the city of $125,000. But per the agreement, they don't need to make that. They won't make that donation to us until 2 more years. And so the auditors have basically said you can't hold that out there as a receivable. You've got to let that go, and then when the money comes in, you can account for it. But basically that's going to then have to come out of fund balance because it was a revenue that you're not going to get. So all of these cumulative give us some pause for concern in that we believe that this may be the first year that there will be pressure on that 25% goal. And it is possible that you'll dip below that. I want to express gratitude to your department heads. Just within the last couple of weeks, I sent them an email and asked them to be even more mindful of their spending as we close out this fiscal year. You all know they do a great job of turning back money and making good decisions throughout the year. I just asked them to be even more mindful of that. They're familiar with all of this. And so we'll see how that turns out. But just looking into next year, again, there's going to be some pressure there on your reserves. Again, and I'll get into a little more detail about the bonds, how those might affect it. But you've also got a number of economic development projects that are in the works that you all are aware of that could require you, if we're successful, and we certainly hope we are, but could require you to tap fund balance in some of the projects that are being discussed. And then you also always have these opportunities for public-private partnerships. I mentioned the Henry Fork lighting. We just had the Tennis Association before you. In some ways, you might look at the Outward Bound donation as something like that, where we've got good partners that come forward and say, hey, if you'll match us, we'll be willing to make a donation to the city. And every time you do in those, and they're great deals because you're leveraging your money, but that is coming out of your reserves. And we don't really know sometimes when those things are percolating out there in the community to come to you. So again, just items that you got to take into consideration as you think about your fund balance. So next I want to just, let's do a summary of the property tax picture. I'm recommending a 56.65 cent tax rate. The current rate is 50 cents. Revenue neutral adds almost 4 cents, and then replacing the privilege license is 2.7 cents. So your total tax rate goes to 56.65. And I want to remind you all that this is the first time in 20 years that you would consider a budget, or you might adopt a budget that has a tax rate increase. So let's go back to this slide a little bit. We talked about, what the average homeowner is paying currently. $750 a year, $62.50 a month. We've already done the math on what revaluation looks like and how that changes their formula. Takes them to $755 a year, or $63.66. Again, the new value after revaluation on average, $140,000 home. Tax rate of $56.65 takes their bill to $794 a year, or $66.17 a month. So when we put it all together, $66.17 is what I would recommend at the tax rate. They're currently paying $62.50, so a $3.67 a month increase in their tax bill, and then the $2 solid waste increase. So basically, this budget on the average home in Hickory would increase their monthly commitment to the city to $5.67. Any questions, comments, things I need to cover at this point?
Is the county proposing to raise their property tax too?
I just saw an email that was sent out by the county manager to the employees that says revenue neutral and 1 penny above that. So I guess you could say they're netting a 1 penny, or the city manager's recommending a 1 penny increase above revenue neutral.
But they're not losing any privilege license.
They're not. No, they actually have other things that they want to fund with that. I didn't actually get into that part of it. I just looked right quick to see what the tax rate was.
Can we talk a little bit about that, sort of that fund balance? Of course, the contract with Freeze Nichols has been appropriated, and that's a big number. So that's out of this year's fiscal budget.
Correct.
Okay, so that's not in the rollover budget. Do you believe that hitting below 25% could happen? Well, I mean, it's a moving thing. I recognize that. So, sort of, when's it going to bottom out? I mean,
well, we'll know definitively the end of July. I mean, when we finished all of our financial statements and the auditors have looked at everything and said, "Yep, y'all got it right," we'll know.
Okay, so we'll know that our fund balance is at that 25% reserve.
Yep.
Or not.
Or not. That's
or
right.
not. But we're not appropriating any fund balance to next year's budget.
No, you are.
Okay.
But you're appropriating a level that is closer to what we have done in the past, which was break even. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But that includes taking care of the privilege license. I mean, that includes the tax rate that I've recommended. But my caveat to that is, so I'm recommending appropriating fund balance of about $1.4 million, which is closer to what we've done in the past. So, I have a higher level of expectation that over collecting revenues and under expending will cover that. Mm-hmm. Okay. But what you have not considered, and I can't consider yet, is any of these contracts that will come in to do design and engineering work on your bond projects. That's this piece that concerns me is, okay, and I've actually got a whole other slide to talk a little bit about thinking through that, so maybe I'll just stop there. But that's the piece that's the unknown. And maybe I should just skip to that slide. You want to do that? Continue that conversation?
Well, I have one more question as it relates to the budget. When does the merit pay? When the employee evaluations and merit pay increases, are they done at the beginning of the fiscal year?
No, they're done in October.
They're done in so 3-4 months into the fiscal year, and that's a one-hit deal. In other words, it's either 3% that one time in October, 2% or whatever.
That's right.
It's not okay.
That's right. Actually, just to kind of stay with the flow of the presentation, let's come back to the fund balance. Because part of what you have to think about in the whole big picture is what's on the horizon as it relates to potential changes at the state level. So I'm going to ask Assistant to the City Manager Yade Fox to come up to the podium. She's our legislative liaison, does great work bird dogging what's going on in Raleigh and expressing our opinions and your opinions to our legislators to help them understand how their decisions affect us. And I want her to kind of tell you what's going on in Raleigh that could become law. Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Good evening, Mayor, members of Council, Mr. Crone. Some of the bills that I'm going to talk about tonight actually it falls into that realm of being a part of the budget, finance, fees, appropriation discussions. So even though these bills have not passed through both chambers, they are still being considered and very much considered what they call alive in Raleigh. So one of the things that I wanted to first talk about was Senate Bill 369. This bill actually changes Articles 39 and 42 from point of delivery to per capita over a 3-year period. Some of the information that we had received back in March from the General Assembly actually said that the city of Hickory itself would lose $2.5 million if this happened. A lot of that is because some of those projections are based off of population growth. Well, some of the things that we have seen from the actual state itself show that we would only grow from a time period of 2010 to 2020 would be 0.8% in growth. So when you use a formula that's going to have something with population as a growth, a lot of times you're not going to see much growth at all, and so therefore we're at a loss. Additionally, this bill actually shows that all of the other municipalities and towns in Catawba County are at a loss along with Catawba County. One of the other bills that's doing something similar is Senate Bill 608, and that's actually Senator Bob Richo's bill. It actually converts local government revenues into state revenues, which was something that's actually put more in an actual bill as opposed to something that could just be done at any point in time. It uses the 1314 base figure with an increase of only 3.5%. As you heard earlier, Mr. Berry said that we're projected currently at a 6% sales tax revenue growth. So obviously that would come as a loss to us. So either way, it doesn't look good. So those are some of the factors that are out there with the sales tax redistribution. One thing I would like to say is that we have heard that a lot of the Senate leadership is having some discussions. They're trying to soften the blow and to stretch it out a little bit more to where it's not such a dramatic impact on a lot of the local governments. We just haven't seen those actual figures yet. They're not public. Another bill that is out in consideration is Lincoln County Representative Jason Sain's bill, House Bill 903. This bill actually provides the opportunity for counties to levy a 1/4 cent for public transportation for general purpose without a referendum. It also gives cities a 1/4 cent sales tax option that they can levy with a resolution. For the city of Hickory, we ran some numbers, and that would be an estimated $850,000 in revenue. I actually heard today we had a conference call with some of our sources over in Raleigh, and although this bill is currently sitting in the House Local Government Committee, and then it's proposed to go to the House Finance Committee if it's recommended, it's one of the bills that we have heard might be used for negotiations. So while you may not see it, it didn't fall into the House bill this week, it may still be up for discussion, and so we're hopeful. And then finally, Catawba County and Alexander County Senator Andy Wells has a bill which is actually Senate Bill 700. I have spoken with you before about this. It's to limit the sales tax refund on nonprofits. This bill would actually cap the amount that are refunded and received by nonprofits. For the city of Hickory, that's approximately about $70,000 that would be coming back to us annually. As we look forward to see what happens this week with the House still continuing to work through their budget, we're trying to just keep track of the different things that's happening and let you know about them immediately as they continue to work through their budget. Once it goes from the House, obviously, then it'll go to the Senate, and then there'll be some more discussion on that.
Any questions of Ms. Fox and what we're seeing in the legislature?
Anybody mention what they're doing with the $400 million in extra money they've collected this year?
No, I'm not aware of that.
We know it hasn't been suggested to be directed to us.
No, but I mean, how much more do they want? It seems like every couple of weeks there's something new to steal money from the municipalities.
Thanks. So, from where I sit, kind of looking at this broad brush, I think there's definitely a move afoot in Raleigh to procure sales tax more to the state budget and less to the local budgets. I think that's some of the models they've seen in some of the other states they've talked to. Senator Rouchot's told us in numerous meetings and in the bills he's introducing, I mean, they basically are trying to figure out, okay, how do we get all of the sales tax to the state, and we'll replace that with an appropriation, as Ms. Fox was saying, to the local governments for a period of time, as would be my guess. I mean, that's how it always tends to work, whether that, whenever they change your ability to tax, they'll give you something to tide you over for a few years, and then it will go away. Broadening the sales tax, there was a lot of conversation about that last session, and including services and all kinds of different things, and certainly Senator Wells' bill starts going in that direction, but of course that's really difficult to do politically. And so I don't, I'm not personally that optimistic of that happening. So my reading of the tea leaves is, given what's going on in Raleigh right now, is there's just going to be more and more sense of reliance on the property tax for local governments. Any changes to the sales tax, have a huge hit on your budget. That's our second most important revenue. So that's kind of our understanding of what's going on there. Okay, so next, to kind of go back and drill down a little more in Mr. Lell's comments and discussion there about the bonds and how it affects fund balance. So the schedule we're on right now with Freese and Nichols is to have the pre-engineering work done in September. The project and program parameters, that's kind of engineering speak, if you will, for how big can these projects be and how much can you spend on each one of them in broad terms, some budget numbers for them done by January. So certainly by January of 2016, you will have some of your committees, I think, ready to come to you and say, hey, we want to hire some architects and engineers and start designing these things after you all approve the scope and basically say, okay, we're comfortable with X million dollars going on each one of these different projects. Again, from a technical standpoint, you can't go to the local government commission and actually borrow money until you have bids in hand, and of course you can't get bids until you've done the design work, right? So you're going to be in a situation, and design is a significant cost of these projects. It will be. Design and engineering will be a significant part of that. So you are looking potentially toward the end of this coming fiscal year of being in a position to say, okay, we need to award some contracts to keep these projects going forward. And we're not going to get the bonds to pay for them, probably for 6, 8, 9, 10 months, 12 months, depending on how long the design and engineering work takes. So the bottom line is you're going to be in a position, I think, to need to front some of these soft costs, if you will, for your bond projects. And that's where the whole conversation about how much fund balance, you're in a great position, but I mentioned the things that are putting pressure on that. How much will you really need? So a couple of alternatives to consider is, do you want to go ahead and consider a bond tax now? Obviously you don't have debt service payments due, but you could levy an additional penny and raise $428,000 and start paying for bond projects, design and engineering work out of that now. It probably would not be enough by itself. Well, I know it wouldn't be. But you would basically be hedging your bets, if you will, using your reserves, but also have a dedicated revenue source coming in to pay for that. Another alternative would be similar in that you use some of your reserves, but maybe you actually go out and borrow some short-term borrowing in order to be able to have cash on hand to pay for the design contracts, engineering work, and then you can pay off that loan and reimburse your reserves if you choose to when you do float the bonds, potentially 2 years from now. Does that make sense? Okay.
What does the state say our reserve has to be?
The minimum is 8%.
8?
Yeah, but if you're at 8, 9, 10%, I mean, you're basically hoping, you're crossing your fingers every time we pay our employees that no checks are going to bounce.
And how does that affect our bond rating?
Adversely at 8%.
No, I'm not talking about 8%, obviously. I'm talking about as we get closer to 25 versus where we are now.
Yeah, you want to have, there's two things we've heard from our financial advisors. They say, A, you want to have a solid reserve, and we're in that category.
When are they considered not solid?
Well, it's a little apples to apples. The numbers they use, the percentages they use, don't marry up to our 25% calculation. All they've told us is, yeah, you're in that range. You're in the middle of that range. You're not on the high end, you're not on the bottom end, you're in that range. But the thing maybe that we need to think about more is the other piece they look at is, are you spending your reserves for operating issues? So basically they want to say, what do you have in reserves, and then what's the trajectory of those reserves? Is the potential that you're going to increase those reserves, or is the potential that you're going to decrease those reserves, and what are you decreasing them for? Now, your history's been great. I mean, even through the recession, even through all the cuts and adjustments, we've actually been adding a little bit to fund balance every single year. And what I've said in those previous slides is that this may be that tipping point year where you actually might start eating into some of those reserves. Again, we won't know definitively until July, close out the books and know for a fact exactly how everything's settled up. But I kind of see some of those things that are out there now that we haven't had out there in the past, that you could actually start eating into your reserves. How much do the bond rating agencies look at that? How much do they weigh that in? We just know it's a factor.
But it's not because we're in distress. It's because we're projecting it's for the bond.
Yeah, part of it's the Freeze Nichols contract. Right. I mean, part of it's one time expenditure on all the bridges and the stormwater damage that we did and didn't get reimbursed all of it from FEMA. So I mean, I think we can make a good argument that the majority of that is one-time funding. Good question. Other comments, questions at that point?
Well, I noticed, I guess the budget's not looking at what the sales tax change could affect. So if that comes in the next few weeks or so.
Yeah, I kind of doubt they would actually implement it because they know that we're all going to be adopting our budgets in June. We have to. They don't, they do these continuing resolutions and stuff. And so I think, Mr. Seaver, what they would do if they make the changes, they say, just like they did with the privilege license, they'd say, okay, effective in 15-16 or 16-17, here's what it'll be. So, because of course there's no way for me to put together a budget having no idea which of these bills, if any, would pass. And that's, again, they did that with the business privilege license. They gave us a year's notice, basically. So just kind of concluding the presentation, the recommended budget is available on the web. Of course, this presentation in video form will also be available. You have an email from the city clerk with a link to download it to your iPad. Asking you to consider calling for your public hearing on June 2nd to get public input. And want to express just serious gratitude, heartfelt gratitude to Karen Hurley and Melissa Miller. They have been burning the candle at both ends, helping me put this budget together, and they've done all the heavy lifting. I'm the guy that sits there and keeps asking them questions and driving them crazy. But we've had some ups and downs with our computer system and just little things that always happen when you're under stress, and they've just been wonderful to hold it all together and keep us moving forward on the budget. And I don't mean to cut off discussion, certainly.
We've got to have it approved by June 30th.
Correct.
And we have a meeting June 2nd and June 16th. 16th or fallback position if something were to fall through the roof on the 2nd.
Well, but actually, you got to do it in 2 readings. So that typically what you've done is adopted it on first reading on the first meeting in June, and then come back to second meeting and adopt it.
If something falls through the roof, we got to work it out that night.
Yes, we do. Or hold a special call meeting.
Yeah.
You can do that too.
But we can't approve it until we have the public hearing. So
Well, that's right.
we can't have the public hearing until we call for it. So you know how it goes.
All right, who's going to make the motion we call for public hearing on the 2nd?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Patton, second by Zagaroli. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. I'm still not sure what that last slide was asking for, Mr. Burry. I mean, we're sitting there, you got that last slide out there. You want us to just reflect on that for the next 2 weeks?
You mean the second to last slide?
Yeah, the second to last.
Yeah, with your alternatives. Yeah. Basically, for you all to discuss that or think about it yourselves. Obviously, you don't discuss it outside of this meeting, and then you can discuss it a lot at the public hearing. I mean, that's really where you
all right,
adopt a budget.
Appointments.
I would like to appoint Kimberly George to the Bond Implementation Commission. Julie Chain took a job out of Hickory and had to resign.
Any other appointments tonight?
Yes, I would like to appoint Casey Gunter to the Public Art Commission. She'll replace Rhonda Hale, who resigned for 2015.
Any others? Do we have a motion to appoint those two?
I move approval of it.
Motion by Seaver.
Second.
Second by Guess. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. Will we have anything going out in the snippets or in some way notifying people that we have a lot of openings coming up June 30th and relatively few applications, I believe?
We certainly can. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Would that be the best thing to do? I mean...
Yep. Lots of ways. Timing, the timing on the snippets is about right.
I guess that anything we can do to get some people to be thinking about whether they would like to serve and consider submitting an application would be good.
Yeah, Mr. Bum looks like he's wanting to write a story about it.
Well, I was not going to be that blunt, but, and I'll put it on my Facebook. Everybody put it on your Facebook, okay? Anything we can do to get this thing circulated and get some applications in.
I guess I better get on Facebook.
Matters not on the agenda?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would like to move that we open a discussion and possible action with regard to matters expressed at the beginning of our meeting from the citizens that came from 4th Street.
Second. Motion made and second that we begin a discussion, a dialogue, a conversation.
Yeah, amongst ourselves. That we have some discussion here at the table. Yeah.
That we talk about it here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. I had under general comments. I was going to start it, but that's good. Well, why don't you get it kicked off?
Okay. Well, let's vote on our motion to.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
Yeah.
That's unanimous.
Yeah. Okay. So I really appreciate those folks coming and speaking to us, and I don't know if any of them are still here or not, but I didn't want the meeting to get away without having an opportunity to discuss it on council. My understanding of the matter is that it's. We have zoning authority as it relates to that particular piece of property. That this particular use is not a rezoning before council. It would not, as a matter of practice, come before council for approval or disapproval. I heard Ms. Kim Clarke make some rather pointed recommendations as to things we could do, which included. Adopt a resolution to bring the Hickory Housing Authority under the city's budget, and to, I guess, she gave mention of our ability to revoke their charter or something that's along those lines. I just wanted to be clear that although those things may or may not be available to us under general statutes, I would not be in favor of moving in that direction for the city, that we bring the city's housing authority under the city budget.
No, and it was at one time, wasn't it?
Been a long time ago if it was, yeah.
And there's various reasons why it's not. I thought they brought up some good points about traffic and safety, and Dr. Hammer said something about some money put in. We have no money in this at all. Okay, I just want to make that clear. I don't think it would be out of line to at least ask the housing authority if they've looked at other sites, certainly to preserve our corridor. I thought they brought up a few good points. I don't know that it would hurt. But like Mr. Lale said, they could perfectly put that building right there without going through city council.
Too, I think when they spoke with us last fall, was it, about the dispersion of public housing, this sort of does the opposite. It's not what I understood last fall was the direction that HUD was going, was for the vouchers to disperse this so that they could have the opportunity to go to northwest, northeast, anywhere in the city, so that we didn't have that concentration. And so this seems to go in reverse of what we were presented with last fall. And I would like to have some communication from the housing authority of what made them make this switch, to understand it a little bit better, why they've decided, if they're wanting to reduce the total number of units available, if they tear down but they're buying more property, since they're taking in more debt, but we'll have extra property available that they could just reuse, if they're just wanting to keep the same philosophy of public housing rather than dispersion.
Would it be advantageous to have this group and whoever else has concerns to take their concerns directly to the housing authority rather than, it seems to me as the housing authority is the first step, and that I don't know if that's been done or not, but it would seem like that would be the obvious, it may be something that they can just work out amongst themselves, and we never have to have any input into it. Does anybody know if that's been done?
No. That's been recommended, but I don't know if it's been done.
Yeah. This doesn't strike me as something that could reach compromise. I mean, it may, perhaps, and I would encourage you to do that.
We ought to give it the opportunity. It seems to me like the cart's being put before the horse. Maybe, I don't know if that's been done, but I would highly recommend that be the first step. I don't think we can just say that, it's unlikely that they'll compromise.
Not knowing the reason for that, but I think it just boils down to the money it's going to cost to buy the place to build public housing units. You buy separate spots all around the town to put 3 or 4 units. It's going to cost more in the long run, I would say.
That's not my understanding of the plan. My understanding of the plan is, again, this is just my understanding, and I have not had contact with the Public Housing Authority in many months. But my understanding is that the objective across the country is to disperse public housing much more broadly than it is now. There is no move to make smaller units. In fact, the objective, as I understand it, is to mix public housing with partially subsidized housing and with market rate tenants.
That's what they're proposal to us, I mean, their presentation to us was about.
Yeah.
And it would return it back to kind of the public sector rather than...
And the borrowings are to be guaranteed by the federal government's pledge to pay the rents in an amount sufficient to cover it, I guess. And I believe this effort is, now, and I don't think anyone's told me this, but I believe they view this as dispersion of public housing.
Well, whether or not we, and I don't know, whether we would consider this to be dispersive of public housing, which really is, whether the real intent is to privatize, right, and get away from the public housing model. But short of what Kim Clarke said, our options are, we really can't exercise, without laying down the hammer, much authority over the Hickory Housing Authority. And I'm just telling you, I'm not willing to lay down the hammer like Ms. Clarke suggested.
And we don't even have the ability to, we don't have much authority to deal with HUD.
Right. Yeah.
As shown by trying to get our $520,000 back that the poor people of Hickory deserve, that's going up to Washington. We couldn't get it back. So
I'd like us to have a better understanding of where the Housing Authority thinks they're going with this plan versus what we were presented with last fall. I would like to...
An update
from them of...
Considering what we've heard tonight.
Versus what they told us last fall of the whole private, being in the private sector, it would spawn the dispersion all over Hickory, and it would be a benefit to everyone for that diversity in every area of town. And this doesn't seem to be going towards those objectives at all.
But it may be going toward privatization. I had not heard until I heard it from Ms. Hammer that that they were raising $7 million in debt.
And that it's the same group, this other nonprofit. I guess I just want to understand that.
Well, there's nothing improper about any of them being involved with any nonprofit.
No.
Now, whether it means they have to resign from the Housing Authority Board to do that, I wouldn't know. What do we have to do to get some clarification on this? We could just say, well, we're not going to have anything to do with it. Let the dust settle. But I have a feeling we ought to know what's going on in this. Whether we're going to do anything or not, we ought to know what's going on.
But I think we ought to go into it eyes wide open. We don't have regulatory oversight. We don't have financial oversight. We have zoning authority with regards to where this goes, but it meets the zoning ordinance.
It meets the zone requirements.
It's zoned appropriate. So I think it's to the extent that we need to be informed about the Hickory Housing Authority's plans as it relates to what we presented. When was it? Like last fall, maybe?
It was August.
It's last August. Yeah, I mean, I think that's okay, but in the context of is this a good decision, I don't know that that's a worthwhile discussion for council because we have limited options.
That needs to be worked out between, my thought is the residents, the Housing Authority, and HUD. Unless there in fact is some reason that we had authority to do something. And I haven't heard that we have the authority within the normal context of our relationship with that group to do anything.
Plus, this is all being driven by the federal government, is it not?
Well, it's being driven by the federal government, but they throw out these opportunities for people to get huge grants to go down this road, and then they don't approve the grants. So I don't know where it stands. I don't know whether it's something that maybe in Hickory people are getting ahead of the curve on it. Why why is HUD giving out these big grants? But not everybody's getting those grants.
Still a lot of questions.
Lots of questions.
So, I don't know. I'd be willing to meet with another council member, Mr. Burry, Mr. Leonetti, meet with them again.
Up to y'all, whatever you'd like to do.
I think we all need to have that understanding of where the housing authorities, where their mindset is and why they're moving in this direction versus what we were presented with last fall.
Yeah. So maybe just have another public meeting like we had the last time. And
That'd be great.
Yeah. I think that would be fine. Just let them explain. Let them explain, not to our satisfaction, but let them explain to the satisfaction of the citizens of Hickory.
Right.
I just consider it as an update. Having the new information that they have now from these concerned citizens, for them to come in and give an update.
Yeah, because the direction has changed from what we were aware of last time. So
I don't think they believe
the
in it.
direction's changed. I
don't think they believe in it.
I think this is their first step right there.
Okay.
This is the first step. We did take the step.
Once again, eyes wide open, we can't, we do not sit, we don't have any way to approve or disapprove of this particular project.
Well, do we want to have another joint meeting, or do we want to just have them come here and address these issues? Do we want to sponsor a forum for both sides to talk?
To let us understand
Update
first
from the housing authority.
Make a decision if we need anything.
And I'm sure they're aware of these concerns of the people that were here tonight.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we ask the housing authority to give an update on their plans for future of public housing.
Based on the recent concerns.
Correct.
Motion by Mr. Patton, second by Mr. Guess. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That's unanimous. We have a Boy Scout with us today. Dad, do you want to introduce him, or you want him to introduce himself? And tell us what troop you with, please.
I'm Daniel Brady, and I'm from Troop 250.
And who sponsored that troop?
This is the plan. And
Well, good to have you here tonight.
I know you're a life scout. How close are you to getting equal?
I'm pretty close. I have to get some more equal requirement advisors and then we'll do the project first.
Well, I don't know whether anyone else has noticed, but I'm going to mention that I'm seeing a lot of paving. Some roads out there are getting very smooth, and I hope I start hearing about them.
I'd like to recognize incoming Assistant City Manager, CFO Rodney Miller, who starts June 8th, is here with us this evening, start getting up to speed on getting things going here. Excited to have him added to the staff.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Motion to go into closed session. Motion by Patton, second by Caesar. All in favor say aye. All opposed no. Thank you all for being here.